Yeah,
I
no.
love this place. I'm going to miss you guys so much.
So can I ask, is anyone taking over after when you leave? Is it Beth going to be the...
Beth's going to be taking over.
She's taking over, yeah? Okay, all right.
At the heart of mature manhood is a sense of benevolent responsibility to lead, a sense of responsibility to lead, provide for, and protect women in ways appropriate to a man's differing relationships. The postman won't relate to the lady at the door the way the husband will, but he will be a man. At the heart of mature womanhood is a freeing disposition to affirm, receive, and nurture strength and leadership from worthy men in ways appropriate to a woman's differing relationships. So though I take a whole book, a little book, to unpack those two definitions. Now, in the home, the Bible makes plain that these definitions imply a leadership role for men that bear the burden of loving, leading the wife like Christ, and implies in the church that men bear the responsibility to lead the church as elders. But what about outside the church, in thousands of possible roles that men and women may fill in society? And my sense is that it is unwise to make a list of women's jobs and men's jobs. There's simply too much diversity and too much flexibility in how many jobs there are and how the jobs are done and what the varying relationships with men and women are in all the various jobs. It just won't work to try to make a list like that. So instead of a list of whether policeman is on the man job or the woman job list, instead of a list, I've tried to provide guidelines for men and women who sincerely want to be submissive to the Bible. And that really is the key. If a person approaches this and just says, I'm going to do what I want to do, then I don't have much to say to them on this score. But if the aim really is, does the Bible have something to say here at the root level of my manhood and my womanhood that would affect the kind of work I do in relationship to the opposite sex, then I want to submit to that and go for it, because that would be God's best for me. So here's one possible set of criteria that I've tried to develop over the years in assessing which roles are appropriate for men and women, which aren't. It seems to me that all the acts of influence or guidance or leadership between men and women can be described along two continuums. And I'll mention these and then show how they apply. There's a continuum from very personal influence, very eye to eye, close, up front, personal influence, to non-personal influence. And the other continuum is very directive, commands and forcefulness, directive influence, to very non-directive influence. And here's my conviction. To the degree that a woman's influence over man, guidance of man, leadership of man, is a personal and directive, it will generally offend a man's good, God-given sense of responsibility and leadership, and thus controvert God's created order. To an extent, a woman's leadership or influence may be personal and non-directive, or directive and non-personal, but I don't think we should push the limits. I don't think those would necessarily push the limits of what is appropriate. That's my general paradigm of guidance. And you can see how flexible it is, how imprecise it is. But so let me give some examples. A woman who is a civil engineer may design a traffic pattern in a city so that she's deciding which streets are one way, and therefore she is influencing, indeed controlling in one sense, all the male drivers all day long. But this influence is so non-personal, and therefore that it seems to me that the feminine-masculine dynamic is utterly negligible. in this kind of relationship. On the other hand, husband and wife, very personal, and hence the clear teaching of the New Testament that the man should give leadership in the home, and she give glad partnership in supporting and helping that leadership come into its own. On the other hand, some influence is very directive and some is non-directive. For example, a drill sergeant might epitomize directive influence over the privates in the platoon. And it would be hard for me to see how a woman could be a drill sergeant, to right face, left face, keep your mouth shut, private, over men without violating their sense of manhood and her sense of womanhood. And I know that the world we live in has gone completely the other way on these things. So I know I'm an absolute dinosaur when I'm speaking these things, and I doubt that moving away from dinosaur truth has been good for the world or will be good in the long run, no matter how sweeping the day is in regard to making negligible sexuality and gender issues in role relationships. So if you combine those two continuums that I just mentioned, I would say it like this. If a woman's job involves a good deal of directives toward men, they'll need, in general, I think, to be non-personal, or men and women won't flourish, I don't think, in the long run in that relationship without compromising profound biblical and psychological issues. And conversely, if a woman's relationship to a man is very personal, then the way she offers guidance and influence will, I think, need to be more non-directive. And my own view is that there are some roles in society that will strain godly manhood and womanhood to the breaking point. We're going to be picky on this. What the problem is that the Bible is clear that women shouldn't teach and have authority over men in the context of, I think that implies, shouldn't be the authoritative teachers of the church. That is elders. That's the way Rick Warren is understanding it, and most of us would understand it that way. Doesn't mean you can't learn from a woman, or that she's incompetent, or can't think, or whatever. It means there's a certain dynamic between maleness and femaleness, that when a woman begins over time to assume an authoritative teaching role in your life, the manhood of a man and the womanhood of a woman is compromised. That's unbelievably controversial. There'd be thousands and millions of people who think that's absolutely, some would say, obscene. That's the language that was used back in the 70s when I was fighting these battles. It isn't obscene. It's recognized profoundly in a lot of young people today as well as older people. I don't want to get into a relationship of listening or attending a church or whatever, where she's becoming now my pastor, my shepherd, my authority, and so on. That, I think, would be an unhealthy thing for a man to do. And I could give reasons for that biblically and I think experientially, psychologically, but
he's going to preach now.
To explain
so
to
my
people
question is this:
the fact that Islam, excuse me, you just pushed me.
sir, I did not push you, sir.
Don't push the Muslims.
Sir, I did not push you.
Please do not aggress the Muslims. Do not push Muslims.
And my wife is not going to let me go home if I don't ask this question, because she can't ask it. You can answer it after this. She just wanted to know why women are not allowed to preach in the church. And if a woman feels that she has the gift of preaching, why isn't she allowed to preach? Thanks.
All right. First Timothy chapter 2 and verse 12. I do not permit a woman to teach or exercise authority over a man. Rather, she is to remain quiet. So, because the Bible says so. And that's it. The other thing is, well, what if a person feels like they have gifts to do that? No one gets to do everything they feel like they're gifted at. No one does.
So what year was this?
I don't know. I don't know. Listen to me. Listen, no, I haven't finished speaking. I haven't finished speaking.
I'm a Christian.
I haven't
You
finished
should
speaking.
listen.
No, but you asked the question. You asked the question. If I don't give the answer,
you should be ashamed of yourself.
If I don't give the answer,
I rebuke you in the name
if I
of
don't give the
Jesus.
answer,
I rebuke you
if I
in the
don't
name
give
of
the answer, you
Jesus.
won't know.